Welcome to series of lectures on Central Asia. This is the second lecture that we are organizing today on a region that has been extraordinarily important from the point of view of India and also from the point of view of the powers that are situated in the region and also in the world at large. This very region of Central Asia, as we said in the last lecture, it has been important for several specialities and peculiarities. One of the speciality of the region was that it was home to a score of the ethno-tribal groups and the subgroups who by and large have been the savageous and the brutal in their behavior and the attitude, and who most of them belonged to the Turkic origin, though there were also some groups also who belonged to the Iranian and the Mongoloid origin. This very region was also significantly important because of the fact that it produced great persons, great scholars, scientists, geographers, and also this region boasted of producing the great saints and the priests in the history of the religions. As we last time said that this region was particularly important because it produced Sayyid Ali Hamdani, the great saint, on the one hand, and Sayyid Yasavi on the other hand, Baqi Billah on the other hand, and many others in the race. And also at the same time, this region produced the great centers which formed not only the centers of economic vibrance but also the centers of excellent culture and civilization. One of the speciality and the peculiarity of the region has been simultaneously that it was possessive of a silk route, which in the historical accounts have been given different names, but so far as the medieval chroniclers are concerned, like Ibn Hakel and Ibn al-Muqaddasi, they have given it the name of Shahrai Abresham. Sometimes they have called it Shahrai Buzarg, and often they have called it as the Shahrai Caravan. So, important question for us is to debate as to what was the Silk Route. In the simplistic terms, let me say that it was a highway, to make you understand. It was a highway which passed through the great oases, formidable mountains, the deserts, forests, and the steppelands. And it covered a very large area that spanned China on the one hand to the east, Europe on the other hand to the west, Russian steppes in the north, and also Iran, Afghanistan to the south, and India in the southeast. Therefore, this very large, as we understand by the term Shahrai Buzarg, the oldest of the routes, oldest of the transcontinental routes, because of the fact that it did not touch one continent, but it touched so many continents together. Therefore, this Shahrai Buzarg was called Shahrai Abresham because of the fact that it traded in a commodity that we call as silk. What was the home of silk? Where was it produced originally? It was produced in China. It was a fabric that was thinner, delicate, transparent, and it was quite durable. And it had a variety of purpose. One of the purposes was that it was worn by the ruling elite and the aristocracy in the civilized world, as a precious robe or a precious textile or a cloth. And also this very commodity of silk was also used for ceremonial functions besides the gratification of the religious structures, whether these were the temples, whether these were the viharas, whether these were the other specimen of the religious structures in the region itself. Another question, related question, is who gave it such a name? Already I told you, in the medieval context, it was given the name by the medieval chroniclers like Ibn Hakel and many others. But so far as the modern period is concerned, the 19th century, it was basically a German scholar and a sinologist who gave it the name of Silk Route. And in fact, he included in this Silk Route the entire tract from China down to Europe, and on the other hand from Russia down to Iran in the south. Therefore, this very particular route, he says that it was in operation and it was functional during the 2nd century BC, or we may call it 3000 years before present. But the question is that, does it mean then we had not any such type of the largest overland transcontinental highway in the region? No, not at all. We had definitely, other than the Silk Route, we had a road system built up in the area. But there was one difference. The difference was that of the time. And the difference was that the commodity in trade. The time was 6,000 years before. And the item of the trade then was not the silk, but it was actually what we called as the rock salt that was produced in Afghanistan, and that was an important object or a substance that was required by the humans as well as the animals for the survival and the sustenance in a region that featured the steppes, the scorchy deserts, the formidable mountains, the formidable forests as well. Therefore, the difference between the Silk Route and the rock salt route was obviously in the structure of the commodity in trade itself. Therefore, what was the structure of the route then during the ancient times? Where from it originated? Where did it go? How many countries did it pass through? And what it is its geographical location in the neighborhood itself. For us, this is very, very important to know, because in Central Asian context, in the regional context, more often than not, it is being debated whether or not there is any scope of reviving the ancient trade route. And in fact, UNESCO, ADB, Asian Development Bank, and World Bank are also coming forward with a large number of the projects to many expeditioners, many explorers, and they have been assigned the job of restudying the possibilities of reviving and resuscitating the Grand Silk Route in the ancient past. Let us move around for a while and look at the map. The map is not, of course, that exhaustive. It is slightly compressed, but I think that it will facilitate us to understand the structure of the Silk Road on the ground itself. Therefore, let us begin with China. This is, you just suppose for a while that this is the Chinese Grand Wall, and in that is adjacent what we called as the Xinjiang or Chinese province, which sometimes we called historically as the Eastern Turkestan, but presently it is called as Xinjiang or Xinjiang. Now in this Xinjiang area, we have Gobi Desert, a very formidable desert situated. This is also sometimes called as the Taklamakan Desert, and it was here that the Silk Route, which originated from the Chinese Wall, it would get bisected here into two parts. One was the northern part and another was the southern part. So far as this northern part was concerned, it would enter modern Kazakhstan at a place which we called as Kulja. But then this area was called as the Kipchak land in the ancient terminology. It was also sometimes called as the Bulgar land. But on reaching this Kipchak area, then going down to the Bulgar area, it would move ahead to Eastern Europe, and from Eastern Europe it would terminate at a place which perhaps is not unknown to us. It is called as Venice in Italy, and which you should remember that it was very, very famous for an intellectual revolution which we called as the Renaissance. And you know that Italy and the Rome has been a part of the grand and the great Roman civilization. So coming back again from the starting point, we say another route was the southern route. So the southern route would move across, or sometimes across, or sometimes along with the Taklamakan desert, and it would reach here, though it is not mentioned here. Khotan is the area. Then onwards is next spot or the settlement. We call it the Yarkand, and then onwards is the Kashgar. And it was from here that it would enter modern Kyrgyzstan. And after crossing, this is the Tanshan mountains. After crossing the Tanshan mountains, it would enter into modern Kyrgyzstan, and from modern Kyrgyzstan, it would go ahead into Andijan area onward. Sometimes it would go to Tashkent, and sometimes it would go down and reach to Khojand, and down it would go to Samarkand, onwards into Bukhara. From Bukhara, it would come next to a place which we call as the Marov in Turkmenistan. From Marov, it would enter into Iran at Mashhad, and from Mashhad onwards, it would go to Tabriz, here again in Iran, and from Tabriz, it would go to Turkey, and from Turkey, it would terminate into Europe, or it would terminate again into the Roman Empire. So it means that the northern route and the southern route ultimately they terminated in Rome, but they originated from China itself. Question is that did this olden road, did this grand highway have the branch routes also? Of course it had a number of the branch routes, and for making them understand, or in order to understand those, we have to again take a trouble and we move around once again and go to the map again. Now see, I discussed to you about the southern route. Now I showed you that it is the Khotan, the settlement of Khotan. The Khotan has been very, very important because it has been a rich center of an ancient faith of Buddhism. And it was here that it would sometimes be connected with India from this side. This is the Karakoram Pass, the Karakoram mountain pass, and this is the Saichen area. And it would pass across the Karakoram, reach to Ladakh, then it would come to Kashmir, across sometimes Zojila Pass, and then another route, it would go to Yarkand from here. From Yarkand itself, it would enter into Gilgit area, from Gilgit area to Chitral, and then it would pass through the Wakhan corridor, and from here it would take a right turn and it would go to Tajikistan, Dushanbe. Then from there it would enter Uzbekistan, or we call it Samarkand, Bukhara. Again it would join with Marov in Turkmenistan, and again with Mashhad onwards, Tabriz, Turkey, and Rome. From here also another route would go onwards directly to Uzbekistan. It would touch the modern Uzbek borders at a place which we call as Termiz. Then from Uzbekistan, Samarkand, Bukhara, again it would go down, then again down, then onwards to this place, Turkey and Rome. Then also some of the caravans, they would pass through the Turkmenistan route. They would enter Turkmenistan directly, reach to Marov, and again to Mashhad, again to Tabriz, and onwards to Rome. And then some of the caravans, they would enter Iran directly here. From Iran, again they would go to Tabriz and many other parts of the world, or the Rome, it's there in the Roman Empire. So viewers, important thing that we have to bear in mind, that this route, the Grand Silk Route, had a number of the branch routes which would touch, which would cross, and which would go along the formidable mountains, the great forests, the great deserts, and the travelers, the traders and the merchants, most of the times, since these routes were quite formidable and they were not without dangers, they would therefore prefer to go in groups, and those groups were called as the kafilas, or those groups were called as the caravans. Now, to define what a caravan is, perhaps you understand, because I discussed that is a group activity of the traders and the merchants, and what was the underlying factor which made them to come closer to each other, to form a class or to form a group in order to carry on the trade and commercial activities beyond their native areas and in the foreign lands. But before that, we should try to understand another very important question, a very pertinent question. How did this Silk Route develop? Did it develop because of any commercial enterprise? Did it develop because of any cherished desire of the humans to engage in trade? To engage in trade both at the regional level and the intra-regional level? Certainly, it was not like that. I should say that it was just incidental, that this Silk Route, if it came into existence or if it came to fore, it was simply because of an unusual event that was related to China, that was related to the Chinese ruler who in the historical accounts is called as Wu Di, and who has been the founder father of a great dynasty which we called as the Han dynasty in the 2nd century BC. It so happened that around the same date, this China as a big power was all the time was exposed to the incessant incursions from the most turbulent and the deadly nomadic tribes from deeper Mongolia, and those tribes most often they were called as the Huns, but they were sometimes joined by other nomadic tribes of the Turkic origin, but every time their effort was to destabilize a settled empire like China and to resort to loot, plunder, and force the Chinese rulers to pay them the royalty or the tribute as a token of the acknowledgement of the relationship on the one hand, but at the same time the supremacy of the tribals and the nomades in the particular region. So therefore, because of these incessant incursions and the raids of these nomadic tribes on the settled peoples of China, a lot of inconvenience had been created both to the rulers and the subjects, as a result of which the Chinese people, who otherwise were very innocent, who otherwise very peaceful, but they felt quite uncomfortable and they felt quite discomfort on account of the intermittent and irregular penetrations that these nomads would most often make into their homeland. So this Chinese ruler Wu Di devised a twofold strategy. Number one was that he raised a very strong, a very preponderant wall around China in order to defend his country and its people against these nomadic tribes, and at the same time he also devised a strategy or a mechanism of just approaching the Central Asian chiefs of the settled areas from Transoxiana, which we call sometimes the area between the two important rivers of Amu and Sierre, and where the chieftains used to rule, and he approached them for the help against the nomads, and he also preferred to have the alliances with those Central Asian rulers. And in order to initiate the process, he sent one of his officials to negotiate the terms of treaty and agreement with the Central Asian rulers. No sooner he left China for Central Asia than he was arrested by the nomadic tribes, and he was held in captivity for a pretty long period of time. He ultimately managed to escape from the Huns and ultimately reached down to the Central Asian rulers. And in their company, he was able to understand certain secrets about the rich cultural heritage of Central Asia. on the one hand, but at the same time he also shared some of the secrets which made China the most prosperous and the most important civilized nations of the world. And this very secret was the secret that was related to the silkworm, the rearing of the silkworm, then processing the cloth or the thread that we used to get out of the silkworms, which we call as the cocoons. We would spin them, ultimately we would process them and would texture them into a variety of the kinds of the cloth. Therefore, it was this particular official of the Chinese ruler who revealed the secret of the silk to the people of Central Asia, and these people onwards made the secret known to the people of Persia, those who later on made it known to the people of Rome. So I should say, because of this durability, the thinness, as well as the delicacy and decency of the cloth, and also the purpose, which I discussed to you in the beginning of my lecture also, this very item of silk became predominantly very, very predominant in the Roman Empire, in the Byzantine Empire, in Persia, in Central Asia, not to talk of China itself. Therefore, a lot of demand began to start with for the same. Everywhere we find out that there was a lot of demand from all parts of the world, and everybody was eager to know about what this kind of silk is, what is it made of, what is its usefulness, what is its efficacy, and how can it be useful. In many respects, it was shown to be of great interest to all people, since it was an item that mostly was preferred by the ruling class, and it was mostly preferred by the ruling elite and the aristocratic families. It was not easily accessible to the common people, the men in the villages, the men in the small factories, but still they had a cherished desire to see as to what it was and how it did it behave like that. Therefore, as a result of this kind of the phenomenon of the demand all around, the wholesale demand, it so happened that the class of the traders on the route, the class of the merchants, they started to engage in its transportation from China and onwards to Rome, and kafilas, scores and scores of the kafilas, and scores of the caravans, they were taking this silk from China to Rome, and they would pass through a number of the roads which also formed a part of the main highway, and in that they transacted. They would take halts at different places, and so would they ensure that the Chinese product would reach to the basic consumption centers in Europe and Rome. Today we discussed the Silk Route in different dimensions. We argued what was the Silk Route, how did it come into existence, how did it develop, what was its geographical location. However, there are many more questions related to the Silk Route, and one of the fundamental questions is that whether this route was alone or exclusively meant for the silk, or there were many other substances and the provisions that were a part of the Silk Route transaction. These questions will be taken up separately in another lecture. Till then, goodbye and good luck.